Hello and welcome. Amidst a decline in fresh COVID-19 cases across India, several states have started the process of unlocking and relaxing restrictions imposed. So, is it high time that we send India's children back to school also? Is it time to prioritize opening up our schools in a planned and safe manner? We now know enough about COVID-19 to be able to design protocols for schools opening that can keep the risks of infection down to acceptable levels. If we can design protocols to open malls, pools and bars without risking lives, why not schools? Is it time to learn to reopen schools with precautions in place? Well, joining us now first is Amar Prem Prakash. He's a class 12 student from Delhi who has moved the Supreme Court seeking directions to the centre and state governments to take a time-bound decision in connection with the physical reopening of schools. Amar, that's really impressive. What pushed you to do this and what does your petition say?
Right. Firstly, thank you for having me here tonight and a very good evening to everyone. So, there are three main points to address. I filed. The first being, of course, the reopening of various states like have and they have done.
Okay, Amar, hold that thought. I'm going to come back to you. We can't seem to hear you very clearly. So let me just, why don't you disconnect and reconnect? But I think this gives us an idea of just how difficult it is. We have these technical problems on our shows all the time. So just imagine being a student trying to study physics, chemistry, math online when your internet isn't cooperating, and the reality is not everybody has access to the internet or a smartphone. Alapan Porel joins us now from West Bengal, and Alapan had to move away from home. Alapan, that's correct. You had to rent a room to study and attend classes on your own for your class 12 exams. Is that true?
Around from my home to attend the class.
Okay, so a bandwidth issue now with Alapan, and this is a really serious matter because Alapan is in class 12. The internet near his home was so poor that he had to move away and live away from his family alone. A class 12 student, imagine doing that to your child. He had to move away from home, spend the entire his entire class 12 year living by himself, renting a small room so that he could attend school. Otherwise, he would have been a class 11 pass out if he hadn't done this. Alapan, let's try Alapan once again. And Amar Prem Prakash? Okay, so Alapan, again, this should make us think what would happen to the girl students, his female classmates in his class. How many parents in his neighborhood would allow their daughters to do this, a class 12 student to move to a city? So what happens to them? Do they just pull them out of school instead? These are all questions we need to think about. We have Ritika Khera joining us. She's an economist and IIT Delhi professor. And Ritika, you believe that we must have an immediate but careful reopening of schools, especially primary schools in India, right? Ritika, you worked with students in Jharkhand and you've found that an education really is not happening?
Yeah, so actually we've been very concerned about the closure of schools for such a long time. Truth be told, I think primary schools should have been treated from the beginning as an essential service. On par with hospitals and everything else that was classified as an essential service. And as UNICEF and UNESCO have said, they should be the last to close if the need arises, but the first to reopen. In our case, it's been actually the opposite. Some of these losses are going to be very hard to make up because, they are time-sensitive interventions, especially at the younger ages. For an older child who has learned to read and write already, you can send some material online. But for a child who needs to be taught how to write, even letters, none of that is happening. So basically what we've been doing is we've done a survey not just in Jharkhand. Our volunteers are spread across a bunch of states: Assam, Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Delhi, Chandigarh, Rajasthan, and a few others. And we've been talking both to parents and students themselves, asking them about what online education has meant for them. And also about what their views are about the reopening of schools. And really the most stark finding perhaps for this kind of audience is that, for these children, online education is just a myth. Most of them, in fact, barely 10% of our rural sample has said that they have the ability to participate in online education. And what that means is, very often when we do talk about the so-called digital divide, the discussion ends at whether or not they have a smartphone.
And long term, Ritika, the pandemic, as per child rights activists across states, it has, reversed the efforts, the gains that we made over decades to bring marginalized children into the fold of formal education?
Right. So based on our conversations, one very important concern that's coming from parents is the loss of skills that the children had managed to acquire. So they're saying, this child was a topper in his class, but that same child is barely able to recognize the letter now. So there are learning losses, but also because these children are basically not being asked to go to school, some of them are now beginning to participate in economic activities within the household. There's not a very big thing of paid child labor, but within the household, helping around at a shop or going and working in the fields, that kind of thing is certainly being reported in our survey as well. And parents are expressing helplessness on two counts. One is that, of course, they understand the value of education, but many of these parents are not able to do any kind of homeschooling because many of them are not literate or very well educated themselves. Secondly, even when they're not able to help the child because they're struggling with their daily, livelihood and all of that, right? So even if something comes on a WhatsApp group for the child and the parent is able to help the child, is actually not able to help the child because time is such a luxury for these people. So there are a whole range of concerns that both parents and children are voicing. And, in our sample, actually, when we asked them the question that would you be in favor of reopening schools or would you be against it, many of the parents say, what kind of foolish question is that? Like, it's a non-question for them, right? They are very desperate for schools to reopen.
But they're desperate for schools to reopen because they care for their children's education, their futures. Let's try Amar Prem again. Amar, you were telling us what led you to take this step,
Yes.
a desperate step, reaching out to the Supreme Court?
Right. So firstly, I think the connectivity issues that I had just faced along with my learned panelists really exemplifies what I stand for, because the
And you're in Delhi, you're in the capital.
Exactly, and I'm sitting at a place where I suppose the connectivity is supposed to be good. But so the reason why I've moved to the Supreme Court is primarily because of three reasons. The first being, of course, the reopening of schools. Now, various states and union territories have reopened schools, like you pointed out. But various other states have not taken even a decision. What I am asking, along with various other students, is a decision from the government as to whether schools are reopened or not. Because, currently we're in a state of limbo. We don't know what's going to be happening. And that's what I want to clear the government. The second being the issues that we are facing, the issues that we've been facing during this time, and the plight of students, honestly, at this point in time. Because if you see, online schooling, online teaching, and testing has not been efficient in most areas. And I'm talking about the majority over here. Various issues across all fronts: connectivity, bandwidth, whether it be people having appropriate electronic devices or not. Of course, not to mention the dearth of a social environment, and even the deprivation of, say, sports and other extracurricular activities, these issues should be flagged. These issues need to be looked into. And of course, I completely agree with Ms. Khera, because when she says that it's really time for schools to reopen, I feel it is. And coming to my third point,
schools have to reopen in some capacity or the other, you're saying. Well, thanks so much, Amar Prem, and all the best. I think your case is going to be heard this week, so we look forward to the outcome of that. But Aarti Tawade joins us. You're a master's student studying development work on the ground with rural schools in Maharashtra. What's your experience been like?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. So as Professor Ritika has also rightly pointed out, I am a part of her team, the school survey team. So basic objective of our survey is to reach out to the marginalized communities in rural as well as urban areas, where we can find out what are the implications of this online education on whole learning experience of the child. So basically, I will be talking about my experience in rural Maharashtra, but I will like to emphasize that what all are the findings from this survey are very much similar across the states in India. Like in one of the cases that we have observed, like the place where I surveyed is a quietly forested area, and students here are literally have to climb up to the hills, have to walk on feet for an hour to reach out to that place, where they have built the hut-like structure out of wood and the plastic to cover their heads, and they used to sit there to get the connectivity, the basic connectivity, so that they can attend the online classes and they can download the stuff that is being provided by the teacher.
So they're climbing on top of trees, sitting there all day, sitting on top of rooftops, trying to get a signal. I mean, this is India in the 21st century. And again, I ask, how many girls are going to be able to do this? What does this mean for their education if you're a girl child in school? They're certainly not going to be allowed to go ahead and do all this. Remember, the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation has also cautioned that 1 in every 5 children will potentially be withdrawn from school if the economic crisis brought on by the COVID-19 lockdown persists, which is why, as Amar Prem is saying, as he has gone to the court to say, give us an idea of when and if schools are going to open. This uncertainty, this open-endedness doesn't work any longer. Dr. Shashank Joshi, you're a member of the COVID-19 task force in Maharashtra. What would you say, given the number of fresh cases being reported daily? In fact, Delhi has reported only 24 cases. Are schools safe for our children if they are reopened?
So, Sara, I think I completely empathize with the feelings of the children and people who have to be deprived of education. We have to look at 4 facts. We have to prepare our schools for this, and the school staff and teachers need to be double vaccinated on a prior. So that is the first thing. See, we have to start school preparedness. There is no two ways about it. Sooner or later, the schools will have to be opened in zero COVID districts, and some pilots will have to be started, particularly in geographies like Delhi, etc. That can be started. In Maharashtra and Kerala, we still have a problem. Kerala is number 1, Maharashtra is number 2. We have districts of concern here, but we have 0 district cases where a pilot can be run, particularly in rural areas where also midday meal schemes, etc. are. So they are very genuine issues. But we need to get 3 things in order. Number 1, school staff to be fully vaccinated. That's number 1. Number 2, ensure that air ventilation and COVID appropriate behavior, including masking, is enforced, because globally the experience with school reopening has been this one. There have been spreader and super spreader events.
Sure.
We will see a lot of experts are a little wary of opening that till a school preparedness plan is in order. If that plan is in order, and I completely empathize with the boy who has gone to the Supreme Court, that they need a plan. They need something in writing that at least by this time. But unfortunately, COVID is unpredictable. At one end, we are preparing for the 3rd wave. And at the other end, we are trying to open up everything too quickly, too fast. And then we should not falter. I think the memories of the 2nd wave have completely erased out of everybody's mind. And tomorrow, if a spreader or a super spreader event occurs, then everybody will be back to square one and say that who's going to open the schools in a hurry.
I'm glad we have you, doctor, because nobody wants to be dismissive of the fears of parents, right? We know that once schools reopen, and we saw that happen in Haryana, in Himachal Pradesh, schools reopened and cases shot up. and the schools had to shut down again. So cases will shoot up if schools reopen. That should not surprise anyone. Is that correct, doctor? But we should be prepared for that also.
Same thing happened. Karnataka also same thing happened. So I think let us first develop a appropriate school preparedness plan. Each state, rural and have districts of exception, run pilots and get this.
But doctor, the question is, you can make these plans for malls. We have made these plans for bars. We have made these plans for pools. Why can't we make these plans for schools, and why shouldn't we have prioritized that? Dr. Sandhya Avasthi joined us. She's the principal of DPS school in Greater Noida. Ma'am, when the lockdown was announced, no one expected it to last so long. And virtual learning was embraced. It was even touted as the future. But are we now doing more harm than good to students by keeping schools closed for such a long time?
So I must tell you that particularly in my state, we have already reopened school for the senior children.
Yes.
We had a week of studies for the children, and prior to opening the school, we developed understanding of COVID protocols. We had orientation of parents. We took survey and we asked parents to give their consent for it. So far, we have only 30% children who have joined the school, but we are hoping that in the weeks to come, more children will come, because the parents who are skeptical right now will gain more confidence, because every day at the end of the school day, we share with the parents what our experience has been. We've take them around the school, we share pictures of the school. And children, when they go back, they speak with their peers. So we've seen a larger number of children coming every day. So we are preparing, we are very hopeful, because we know that schools have to reopen.
And it's critical to get the parents involved, and to finally it's the decision of the parent to decide whether to. So you still provide an offline option, online and offline.
We have both.
So they have both, so the parent can choose what they want for their ward. I want to try Alapan Porel one last time. Alapan, I know you've made an effort to join us on the show, and we want your story to be told. Your voice also deserves to be heard. Go ahead.
Actually, we want to say that obviously the COVID restrictions should be implied. It's not yet done with it. So, but when malls or other shopping malls is opening, why not schools? It's a place for learning, or we are learning with it, but we don't have the environment for it. So, just we must have a plan to go for it. We can say that it will moving. It will start from that day, or we can expect to start the school. This unexpected situation is not worth having for a student.
And Alapan, I want to double check, you also could not give 3 exams of your class 12?
Yes, I could not take the exam, and that's the effort for our future career as well.
So that's going to affect you going forward. Your total mark sheet valuation will be affected.
Yes. Yes.
And your parents obviously had to spend money to rent this room for you for this whole year.
There's no option for it. So we have to do it, or we have to drop out from the school.
All right, so a huge financial setback also. Otherwise, he would just have to have dropped out. He would have been a class 11 pass for the rest of his life. And that's a reality for many of our children. That is India's future. The people for this as part of our special campaign Vaccinate India in partnership with Google is Dr. Chandrakant Laharia. He's an epidemiologist, he works with public policy, and he's a health systems expert. Doctor, if you've heard this discussion, if we can design protocols to open malls, pools and bars without risking lives, why not schools? I ask that, but many would think I'm being naive. The answer is obvious. There's no vaccine for kids. So given that there's no vaccines for kids, you think kids have to stay at home, right, in order to be protected?
What we need to remember that in no part of the world for younger than 12 years, vaccine is being administered. So vaccines are there only for 12 to 17 years. still schools are open for all age
Fair
groups
enough.
across the world. So the first point is that vaccination of children is not a prerequisite to open schools. This is an add-on. So schools should be open without vaccination of children. If vaccines become available and recommended by experts for a specific group, that will be add-on, but there is no, it's not prerequisite.
But are there studies now that there are antibodies in kids?
Of course, so we know that fourth nationwide sero survey conducted in India has found that children has between 6 to 17 years has antibody at the similar rate which is for the adults. So children are developing infection even when schools were closed.
But
And
does
how they
the
develop?
presence, doctor, does the presence of an antibody mean that a person here, the student, will be COVID immune?
Well, we need to remember that whether antibody or not, children do not develop severe disease. We know that the risk of developing severe disease in children is 1 to 8,500. So somebody who is 80-year-old is likely to have bigger risk of developing severe disease. Children do not have. We also have numbers. For example, of all the severe disease, all the deaths, the ratio, one death in the age group of 1 to 18 happened for every 1,500 deaths which happened in the adults. So children do develop infection at the same rate. So antibody reflect that children have developed infection, but they do not develop severe disease. Out of 430,000 deaths which have happened in India due to COVID-19, around 1,500 are in the children. And majority of the children who died due to COVID are the one who have a pre-existing condition. So COVID is not serious disease for children.
Okay. So, but the first obvious low-hanging fruit solution here would be to, rapidly increase our vaccination process, right? To have parents, teachers and staff double vaccinated. We had Dr. Shashank Joshi also say that. But how long does it take to develop immunity after a COVID vaccine?
So after a COVID vaccine, once a person need to complete the primary immunization, which could be 1 shot for example, for J&J vaccine, 2 shots for most of vaccines, and now 3 shots for J-CoV-D. So once person receive required primary dosage and then wait for 2 weeks, the person is considered to be fully protected.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Joshi. Thank you. The rest of our panelists, I think we should sum up by just saying that we need to protect our children from the coronavirus, but we also need to ensure that we don't expose them to a future life without a quality education. Thank you for joining us on We the People.